so much, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and moderating this panel of incredible design leaders. And so how the next 45 minutes is going to work is I'm going to introduce our panelists here. And we have a list of questions that we're going to be asking. The Talk UX team had actually done a call to see who wanted to submit questions, and so we incorporated some of your questions into what we'll be asking. We're not doing Q&A for this portion, but our panelists will all be around for lunch, so I encourage you, if there is something that you wanted to ask that you didn't hear answer, to find them afterwards. All right, so first I'm going to introduce Amy Cueva, and Amy believes that design can help improve the human condition. And she, with that vision, founded MadPow in 2000 with Will Powley. It's an award-winning agency that takes a purpose-driven approach to design solutions. She plays an essential role in MadPow's thinking of the new healthcare system in the US. And she was the instigator behind the Healthcare Experience Conference and is the managing director of the Center for Health Experience Design. Amy's an international speaker and has been on Women to Watch lists, 40 Under 40, and most recently, Pharma Voice's 100 Most Inspiring People. And she's a visiting lecturer at Mass Arts Masters of Design and Innovation Lab. Help me welcome Amy. Woo! And next we have Libby Mauer, who's the director of UX at HubSpot, where she builds customer experience teams focused on SaaS products. She leads HubSpot's UX practice with vision for driving user-centered design with data. And she practices servant leadership, coaching her team members to develop their unique strengths. She's also helped lead her team's diversity and inclusion efforts. Libby has a background in design research, service design, content strategy, and brand strategy. She grew up in the Midwest and studied journalism and French at the University of Wisconsin, and will graduate with her Master's of Human Factors from Bentley in 2019. Help me welcome Libby. Awesome. Next we have Kate Brigham, who's a design experience leader with experience spanning healthcare, biotech, education, computer gaming, and most recently, food as the director of design at ezCater. She previously led the design team at Patients Like Me. And in her process, she uses listening to people's stories, asking questions to really help uncover insights to make products that customers will be successful with and love. And she's now been building and empowering teams of designers and researchers, which she's found to be her most rewarding endeavor. She has a BS in economics and art history from BU, and an MFA in design from Mass Art. Help me welcome Kate. And last but certainly not least, next to me is Susan Rice, who leads UX strategy, research, and design at Toast Inc. When Toast's team is revolutionizing the restaurant industry. She has deep expertise in both B2B and B2C products, and she's passionate about motivating and coaching team members for growth in a psychologically safe and fun environment. She holds an MS in Human Factors and Information Design from Bentley and a BA in Psychology from UC Santa Barbara. She's active in the UX community and has presented on design thinking, strategy, and organizational change. Help me welcome Susan. Awesome. So as you see, we have an incredible group of panelists here that are going to share their experience as design leaders. And so what I'd love to start with, and I'm actually going to start with Kate here, is to hear a little bit about their path to design leadership and how each of them got into the roles that they're in today.
Sure. So it was funny, when I was thinking about this question, I was struggling a little bit to answer it. And I realized one of the things that happened for me is I worked in companies with really small design teams. So it was often me and another person maybe. So there weren't great leadership opportunities. When I got to Patients Like Me, we were a team of 2. Again, I was sort of struggling to figure out how could I try to move up. Did I need to leave, go to another company? And there ended up being an opportunity for me to lead a team that was a totally different set of functions. So I got a chance to head up the customer support and community management functions in our organization. And it wasn't really presented to me as an opportunity. It was sort of me saying, wait a minute, things are shifting around. There's a role opening up. I really want to manage people. I want to be a leader. It's not going to happen in UX. I can try it in this space. And so I really went after it. And I remember sitting at Starbucks, trying to convince Ben and Jamie Haywood, who were pretty tough customers, that they should take a chance on me as a first-time manager managing 2 functions I had never done before. And for some reason, they decided to give me a shot. And it was a really humbling experience to try, A, to manage people for the first time, and B, to learn 2 things I had never done. And it made me really stop and do a lot of listening and ask a lot of questions and have to look to peers and other people in these spaces to see what they had done, how they approached problems that we were solving. And it was a fantastic experience. I worked to try to figure out how to pull data analytics out of our customer service work to report on sort of what we were hearing so we could feed it back into UX. And to me, it was an opportunity to do UX leadership in a different facet and in a different sort of a way. So that really kind of got me started. I ended up then having a chance as our team grew to move back into UX leadership after we brought Kim Goodwin in to do some work with us, and she was like, you got to come back to UX, like this is crazy, or we need you. So that was a fantastic opportunity to have, but actually the most striking thing I realized is it was a lot easier to manage a function I didn't know than it was to manage designers. So we can talk about that a little bit more, but sort of, my path wasn't entirely straight. But I think, even once I sort of got into a leadership role, it took me a while to get my footing. I think now I've sort of hit my stride and I'm really loving it. I wouldn't do anything else, but it was definitely not a straight path.
Awesome. Thanks. Libby.
Yeah, I love this question because my path also has not been linear by any means. So I started my career in content strategy, content design, before that was even a thing, and did that for a few years. Went to work for an agency doing brand strategy and brand research. And then I did this massive career kind of exploration. I wanted to root in an industry that I could spend the rest of my career in. And I took about 9 months to do this exploration, and I thought, well, there seemed to be an awful lot of opportunities in healthcare and in the technology space. I knew nothing about healthcare, had no training or background in it, and so that didn't make sense. And so I pivoted into tech. And one of the things I realized almost immediately is I felt like the odd woman out. I felt odd. And the reason I felt strange is because I was often the only person in the room representing customers or users. I was that person raising my hand saying, we keep talking about what the business wants and needs, but what about our customers? What about our users? Shouldn't we be driving decisions based on that? And that made me feel very lonely until I realized that there is a whole world of people out there, you all are them, who are thinking this way. And this is the way we should be thinking. We should be celebrating it and resourcing that. And so once I kind of came to that realization, I just educated, I kind of threw myself into educating myself about user experience, about customer experience. I read everything that I could. I networked with anybody who would talk to me about this. I sent myself to Nielsen Norman training for a week on my own dime, just because I wanted to make an investment in what I was thinking about to see where it would go. And I eventually got up the courage to put together this research plan for the CEO of my company at the time. We didn't have a UX team. I was starting to do product design kind of under the cover of darkness, doing usability testing, wrote a style guide, and I was doing it sort of moonlighting because I was afraid that I would lose my real job at this company if I kind of talked about it. I believed deeply in it, so I put together this research and I booked an hour with my CEO. I was terrified. This is the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my career. And I pitched it to him, and I didn't think he would do anything with it. I thought, well, I'll have to leave this company and go find another opportunity. And do you know what? He bit. He took it. He was like, you're absolutely right. I think we should invest in this team. And then he said, and I want you to lead it. And holy shit, did I have a crisis moment. I never in a million years expected that response. And I actually asked for some time to think about it. I wasn't sure, actually. Like, once the opportunity kind of came my way, I really wasn't sure if it was the right thing for my career. So I took some time to think about it, and then I think I made the right decision, and I built that team. I built another team, and then I moved across the country to take this opportunity at HubSpot, and I'm just thrilled. So that's kind of my story. Yeah.
Great. What about you, Amy?
I am not a leader, so we can talk about imposter syndrome
Yes,
later.
you are.
But
Yes, you are.
we'll talk about that later. No, I love design. I love finding new ways of looking at things. I love that design is a methodology for solving problems and pursuing opportunities, and I'm extremely stubborn, so I wanted to do it, and I wanted to learn about it, and I wanted to talk to other people about it, and evangelize about it, and do it more, and just the process of doing that. And I think, you know, the ladies and I were talking about this earlier. It's like, how did you get into leadership? You were awesome at your job, and you kept doing it, and then people noticed, and you brought them along with you, and then you got elevated, and that's sort of what it's all about. But, you know, we were talking too about the difference between leadership and management, because I actually think I'm a terrible manager, and others notice, and so I manage fewer and fewer people as time goes on. And that's because when it comes to management, I'm like, do your job. If you don't know what it is, ask. If you're doing a bad job, I'll tell you. If you're doing a good job, I'll congratulate you. And if you want to talk to me, let's have a meeting. So I don't do one-on-ones. I don't like do all that. And part of that's bad because some people aren't advocating for themselves, and they really, you know, need a path and need guidance and everything like that. So being a good manager requires diligence to that end. And I'm glad that we do have some really good managers at MadPow. When it comes to leadership, I'm really kind of obsessed and passionate about doing something that's real, because we live in the digital realm and we're designing screens and pixels, and I'm a lover of research, so when you talk to the real people, to your point, who are going to be affected by the solutions we're creating, then you're like, oh, this is real. Like, I can make an impact, and I don't want to just make shiny objects and things like that. I want to actually change people's lives, and as happy crappy as that sounds, like, I do believe that we can do it. So I'm stubborn and obsessed about trying to focus on that and get there. Recent passions include systems design, transition design. I love it when designers stick their nose where they haven't previously been, like designers in government, designers tackling our hardest problems, and I believe that we can do that. We can use design methodology to solve some of our biggest challenges. So yeah, good leader, I guess, but terrible manager. Yeah.
Thanks, Amy. And Susan, what about you?
Yeah, I don't want to report to Amy. Let's start there. So we were talking about this. So just to take it like all the way back, I started I was waitressing for a very long time, which makes toast really interesting for me now, managing all those things in the restaurants. And then one day somebody said, you know, you should get into that like web design, because I was really bored at this point. You know, I'd graduate college, all those things. So you should get into that web design thing. I was like, okay. So that's pretty much how it went. I borrowed money from my husband, and I got a 330-hour degree, graphic and web design certificate from Clark University. And so that kind of catapulted me into my first kind of really bad job, which really bad. 7 people in a room. I know now. I think it would be illegal to do the things we were doing there, in terms of just so many people in this tiny little space. So it was like this startup before you even talked about startups, right? Before there was even the word startup. So did that for a little while. Went to a couple different companies, team of one, multiple times in startups, and then finally I just decided. I was at the time getting my master's degree at Bentley. And I was just about to finish, and I finally decided that I wanted to change and just join a team and like learn from an existing team. It's one thing to kind of go at it on your own, and yes, you can learn so much out there, and there's a lot more content now that's available for just to build up your confidence and all those things. But at that point, I just was like, years of doing this on my own, I want to learn from others, and I want to be part of a bigger vision. So I joined a really great team at Staples. We had, it was quite a few people, 20-something people, well-established. And I joined them as their manager of information architecture. I'd never managed people at all. I didn't know if I wanted to manage people, but I wanted to join the team. So I was like, sure, I could do that. Yeah, I know it's not typical for a woman. I don't know, there's whatever things. But I did that, and so I joined the team as their manager, and I started having a couple people report to me, and my first job, I had no idea about what management took, and we're not even talking about leadership yet, because they are different. And so I was a bad manager. I really wasn't a very good manager, and I wasn't liking it. But I didn't know, kind of why exactly. But at that point, I decided, you know what, I've been here a couple of years, I've been learning, I've done, I've kind of reached those goals that I was looking to accomplish when I first got here. So I went and, well, actually, I was kind of a passive candidate, I wasn't looking actively, but a really great recruiter reached out, and I was like, oh, Vistaprint, interesting. Yeah, let me learn more. And the more I learned, the more I thought it was really interesting. And I went back and actually decided not to be a manager. I took an IC role, so an individual contributor role there, working on internal tools, and I thought, well, that's awesome, because my users are right there, and I can really create success metrics that I can measure very actively. I can know whether or not I'm making a difference, and so that was great, and it was working out really well. And then there was this opportunistic moment where one of the designers from kind of more the customer-facing e-commerce site left. And that left a hole. And I was like, sure, you know what? I can jump in. Yeah, sure, I can do some stuff now. I'll do my internal tools. I'll do this stuff too. That's cool, And then what was awesome about that, it was a new learning, because at that time I didn't have A/B testing experience. And Vistaprint was like A/B testing on steroids. With a homegrown system, 164 cells. It was really amazing, and not something that a lot of companies were talking about that much yet. And so I was like, yeah, what? I could put out a test, and in like a week I can learn that we just made $100,000 extra in AOV this month? Yeah, let me do it, right? Such a gratifying experience. So I just kind of kept doing that organically, and then it was like, oh, I could actually hire people to help me do this more. So it was back into this notion of, oh, do I want to manage? I'm like, okay, yeah, you know what? It's not about managing at this point. This is about growing people so that we can do more with more people. So I just didn't think about it that way. So I started hiring a couple people and organically became this manager. But the most amazing thing about this is that about a year into my management there, I was part of a program that they offered for a management development program. Pretty intensive, 1 year on site, and I was the 5th cohort, and it was amazing. Honestly, it's one of the best things that has ever happened to me in my career. It helped me understand what management really means, and it's not just about like, oh, a review at this one point in time for your direct report. It's not about just giving them critical feedback. It's about also giving them really moments where they can see they're recognized and rewarded for really positive things that have, and positive outcomes. And so many other factors. And, it was just an amazing experience that made me realize, oh, wow, you actually don't need to know how to manage just organically. You're not expected to do that. It's actually a trained skill. Now, if you're an empathetic person, which I wasn't before, you might naturally be better at management than I was. So I had to learn all that kind of like that empathy and why it matters and the importance of relationships and how people think and how you have to individualize every single one of your relationships with your team members to really help them grow to their greatest capability. So yeah, I think that for me that was really important to know, is that it's not something you just have to already have, and that you can go out and learn about it and become really effective at it. So that's all management. At some point, that kind of starts pivoting. The more successful you are in something like a management position, you have more opportunities then to become a leader within your organizations. And that's showing, results at the end of the day. Are you driving outcomes for the organization, for the business? Are they seeing success based on what you and your team are doing? That starts getting you into pivoting into that space. And then since then, I've really been able to grow that in the different organizations that I've joined. So that's how I got into design leadership.
Awesome. That's great. Lots of different paths from, doing some management, going back to practitioner, and going back to management, to just, working really hard and getting to where you wanted to go. And so now that we've heard a little bit about their paths, I'd love to hear more about the day-to-day as a design leader. And I know you started talking about this, Susan, so maybe if you want to pick up of just what does your day-to-day look like as a design leader, and what are some of the skills that require besides just empathy and management?
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about the importance for a leader to be adaptable. My day-to-day is, there's not a typical day. Right now I am heavily focused on recruiting, so about 50% of my role for the past 8 weeks has been focused on that. But honestly, in the next few weeks, things will shift, so I could do everything from being up here on this panel, to being in a room with our marketing leaders and helping them understand, where there's opportunity for us to collaborate on, their new marketing website, for instance. Just right now, it's a lot about introducing myself to I'm the new member of the Toast team, so meeting with all of the executive team members, really understanding what makes them tick, and then understanding where they think that there's value that I could help add into the organization. But then there's so many other things, right? I'm like, month 1 was all about people being my team. I came into an existing team of 8, and I absolutely needed to understand each as an individual, again, so that I could help them grow and know where their opportunities are as well as their strengths. Obviously, I needed to understand my manager to know what makes him tick, and what I can bring value to, what I can do for him that would bring value to both of us. And then again to the organization, and then meeting all those other people. So I'm kind of in an interesting part of my journey with Toast, since it's so much about onboarding right now. So month 2 right now is about product and getting a little deeper in product, and then month 3 is really focused on process. But I mean, honestly, every day is kind of different.
Yeah, awesome. And Amy, what about you? I'm curious, especially working within an agency, what's your day-to-day like?
Yeah, I mean, I used to do the wireframes and the coding, the visual design, and the project management, and I used to do stuff, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, what do? I go to a lot of meetings. Do I have any skills? I hope MadPow lasts. Jeez, please. No, okay. So, no, I do, though, a lot of speaking to share our beliefs and our methods in the industry. So we're doing experience innovation, behavior change design, and digital stuff, but in the direction of designing for financial well-being and designing for improving health and designing for social impact. And so I'm sharing that, and it just so happens that in the context of that, and sorry, I'm jumping the gun, guys, I end up finding a lot of people who share that belief and want to learn more about those methods, and so they want to join the company, and we are hiring. And so that's sort of, I make a joke when I introduce people to the other folks at work. I'm like, send my commission check in the mail, Amy Quint instead of A Quint, get it? And they think it's hilarious. But no, part of it too is, I heard the other day that instead of crafting a strategy and then sourcing a team to address that strategy, that it's better instead to understand what your team is passionate about and then form a strategy that leverages their passions and their skills, because that way it's going to be self-fulfilling, it's going to gain momentum. And so that's happened over the years. We built our service design discipline before it was sort of a thing, because one person was really passionate about it. We built our behavior change design discipline because of that, and now we're starting to build out our social impact discipline because of that. And that means we're going to have happy, engaged employees who are going to do awesome work, and that's going to lead to the longevity of the business. So we do try to do that. And again, shouting back to what you said about customer need, I love that in the news recently, Michael Porter's approach to strategy is sort of debunked, in that it's all about needs-based strategy and needs-based design. Talk about, like, we're in demand, and the business needs us. And so you might have been the lone advocate in the past, and we all have been there, but not anymore. Like, they need us, damn it.
I so agree with that.
Yeah.
Can I pick up here?
Yeah.
So to the original question, my day-to-day is also all over the place. I'll say I've spent the first year in this position doing a lot of ops, right? So really digging into org design in a way that will set us up to scale in the future. We're a big team. We're also a really fast-growing team and company. And so, when I joined this team, there really was no org structure at all. And so it took about a year to put that into place. We are a very specialized team. We've got product design. We also have content design. We have 2 data teams. One is a user research team, and one is an analytics team. And so that was kind of my first year in this position, which is really interesting because I don't really have an operations background at all. And so I love Susan's point about adaptability as a leader, really, in any position or company, because I think really what you have to learn how to do is pivot very quickly to what the business and what the team needs, and also what your customers and users need. So that's been my last year. And as I'm kind of emerging from that, continuing to grow the team, of course, with a good structure in place, my role is really shifting to finding opportunities where we can make an impact in the business in ways that we haven't before. And so an example of that is, as a fast-growing company, we're really looking to streamline a lot of processes and experiences that have been traditionally human-led, because as you can imagine, those just don't scale very well, and also they're not great for users, they're not great for our customers. And so I am building a lot of relationships, making connections, networking throughout the company with our sales department, with our services team, with support, trying to identify areas where we can come together horizontally and kind of reimagine some experiences and bring them more into our product or solve them touchlessly. And so I spend a lot of time in my day making those connections and helping people understand how we can imagine these experiences differently than we have before, which is really tough. As it turns out, getting people to think that way isn't automatic, and it takes a lot of time to sort of chip away at that, kind of tease some ideas their way, help them understand how we can sort of operationally and tactically execute to make them happen. The other thing I do a lot of is partnering with people in the business to help them understand how we will measure our work and our impact, which is, I think you've got a question coming up about this, but for us that's been key in, me especially, been key in helping the business understand why they should make more of an investment in this team and all the disciplines on it. So yeah, I would concur with kind of both of you. It's sort of, my days are very, very full, and I never know what's going to come at me ever. So adaptability is key.
Kate, what's your day-to-day like?
So I think very much like you've heard everybody talk about, there's a lot of variability and there's a lot of need to change. But one of the things that struck me, I've been at ezCater for not quite 6 months now, but I sort of came into the organization and I looked at it as a design problem. I thought, okay, they're bringing me in, they've given me some explicit things that the team is asking for. We needed team structure, people really wanted reviews, they wanted growth paths. 2 teams were coming together that had not been under the same leadership before. So it was sort of me needing to come in and say, what does this organization need in order to take this function that we have, actually these 2 functions that we have in product design and research, and really make the best use of them that we can for the company, for what the company's trying to accomplish. And so, I started with a listening tour, and I started by asking everybody, what do you think our goals are? Sort of what's working now, what's not working now? And really use that to kind of kick off a process of recognizing, like, wow, even though we talk a lot about goals in this company, not everybody knew what they were. So part of it was just helping people understand, what's the company looking to us to accomplish? How do we actually figure out what that looks like and make it kind of clear and explicit as opposed to this vague sort of fuzzy thing? So one of the things that's really important in our company is speed. We really like to work fast, but we also want to do great work. Okay, well, what does quality mean and what does speed mean, and how do you work together to do those 2 things at the same time, because they're often in conflict with one another. So a lot of it was just sort of thinking about it, talking about it, working on it with the team, sort of coming at it from a bunch of different aspects, building relationships with people and understanding, how does that work in the engineering space? How does that work in other parts of the organization? So one of the things that I think is the most interesting part of my day-to-day is it's really for me to design and to drive and to prioritize. I have a boss who thankfully is sort of like, I don't know, you're doing good stuff, just keep telling me what you're doing. But he's not going to give me direction. And so I think one of the really fun parts about being a leader is to be able to come in and just see what the need is, see what the opportunity is, get to know your team and figure out what they want and what they need, and to really sort of build a structure in place. Our team wanted to have a bigger, stronger voice within the organization and within the broader community. And I mean, Lara and Olga organizing this conference, Yi volunteering, like, holy crap, they're doing it. They are amazing, amazing women. Woo woo. And you know, as powerful a voice as they have outside the organization, they wanted a more powerful voice inside the organization. So how do we start to do that? How do we start to elevate the voices of people? You know, starting to think about that and giving them platforms for that, something that became really important and is, you know, sort of ongoing. So I think, you know, for me, a big part of it is just figuring out sort of what do we need, where are we going to go, are there skills my team needs to develop? Another big thing is just we're also growing. We're hiring too, just like everybody else. So, you know, we're all here both going like, yeah, we want all of you to come work for us.
You said we were going to arm wrestle.
We'll all be friends at the end of the day. But, you know, I have 2 women on my team who were both really interested in becoming managers. And so helping to elevate them and allow them to become first-time managers and to recognize the potential in them and to sort of see that potential in the team and to really think about, well, how can we structure ourselves so we can grow? How do we give people opportunities who clearly want them and are absolutely in a great position to be able to take it and just sort of need that first chance, need that first opportunity? So I think just a lot of it is sort of, it's putting your design skills into practice with organizational challenges and problems and issues in a way that, you know, maybe you would have applied them to design problems. So for me, that's, I think, a lot of my day-to-day.
That's great. So there's a lot that goes into being a design leader on the day-to-day. And I'd love to pick up on what Libby had mentioned about really helping advocate for design within the organization. Amy had mentioned, you know, everyone knows y'all's value now, but what about if someone, this is actually a question that came up from someone in the community, if someone, you know, feels like they need to advocate for design within their company, what advice do you have, or how do you do that? And we could start with Libby and then whoever else wants to chime in.
Yeah, sure. So we have an exceedingly data-driven team and also company first and team. And so I think one of the things that I'm learning, and this has been a journey, of course, we're not perfect at it, but I'm learning that the first thing that I do when I'm trying to help leadership understand our value and impact, and then also continue that to like asking for more resources, I think about what motivates them. I think about what sort of, you know, I look at how they make decisions to resource other teams, and I sort of use that as a template to drive how I'm going to also ask for those resources. And like I said, data is really valued in at HubSpot, and so we are taking the track of really measuring our impact and using that to drive why we should be better resourced. So one example I have of that is our business is obsessed with Net Promoter Score, NPS, which I know this is a hot button for probably many of you in this room. And frankly, I'm still deciding how I feel about measuring NPS as sort of the main measure of customer satisfaction. However, we are starting to use that score and the feedback that comes with it to demonstrate the impact of our team. And I am having success using that to, you know, say to the business, hey, you should resource us more. So that's kind of the track that I'm on now. I don't know if anybody else is doing the same. I will also say that I don't think NPS is the end all be all. There are many measurements that we can play around with. SUS is one of them that I've used before. Customer satisfaction score, of course, and I'm sure you can get creative with your own. But that's kind of the track we're on. Anybody else?
Yeah, just on the, oh, sorry, go ahead, Susan. Oh, okay, just on the KPI front, I totally agree with you. Identify the KPIs that matter to your organization and have empathy for the leaders and when you're working with them and what they care about. That's so good. Sometimes you'll agree with the KPI, sometimes you won't agree with the KPI. If there's a different KPI that you wish that you had, start to like secret track that and then kind of do like a correlation or start to build evidence for the Mo-Beta KPI that you like. But I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, and he's actually building a fancy dashboard that basically, he's like, okay, what can we track? What is trackable? And start tracking those things, so tracking engagement or tracking clicks or tracking whatever. And then tying what is trackable to other business metrics that are also tracked to start to make those correlations. So you might not be able to set out and say, we're going to track this and track it. Instead, track what you can and then make that kind of relationship. I talked to a chief design officer once, and he said, I refuse to have the discussion of why design is valuable. If the person doesn't get it, I don't even want to talk to them. And like, of course, we can't all be that cocky, but there are certain things like the design value index and just, like Harvard Business Review and stuff like that sort of like backs up our argument. So IBM actually did a study on ROI analysis of design practice inside IBM. I'm sure it's not perfect, but there are proof points that you can certainly leverage, but it's not like you're going to give a stack of documentation to the leaders, but through listening and understanding what they care about and making those correlations, it can help.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, that study. During the interview process, it came up where I was talking to the president about design and the ROI of design, and he had mentioned the DMI study, and I was like, nice, yeah, well, that's awesome that you even know about the S&P, 500, and, it's something like over 220% of the design, the companies that were considered design-led performed over 229%, I think it was, better than the ones that were considered not design-led, of the S&P 500. So DMI study, it's out there. So he mentioned it to me, and I'm like, that's really awesome. Let me throw one at you. Let me tell you about the new IBM study that came out on ROI. I'll send you a link afterwards. So it was really great to continue that conversation and leverage, content that's out there in the world and some studies that are out there in the world in your favor. I've done that previously with 4 articles. It's partly how I was able to launch a design thinking program at MindBody, was because I'm like, look, even Forbes is talking about it. Those kinds of things. One thing I was going to mention on top of the things that you guys already have talked about with metrics and everything is sometimes you don't have metrics, honestly. Sometimes it takes a while to add tracking or tracking data, or you don't have NPS, or you don't have some measurement factor, and that shouldn't stop you, honestly. So I would say show, don't tell, that whole notion. If you think that you're going to get people to believe in design by giving them lots of things about process and look at our process and our methodology and all this stuff, nix it. Like, that's not what's going to happen. It's actually showing them some kind of outcome. It does not have to be super quantitatively, statistically significant, but it has to show results of some kind. And the closer you can tie those to the results that matter within the organization, whether that be increasing, retention by some, percentage, which you're not saying that's what you're doing. You're saying your work is driving towards that, and that matters because that's one of our organizational priorities this year. Those are the kinds of connections that your executive teams want to hear and want to know that you understand that, and that design is not just some other thing, fluffy.
I think that's such a good point. And I actually have an example of that. About a few weeks ago, my team did kind of this hand-wavy show and tell 1 hour. We call it Science Fair at HubSpot. And usually every month, teams get up and they present a bunch of different stories about new product that they've shipped and launched. And so I signed us up for this science fair a couple weeks ago, and we framed it from a customer experience standpoint, and all of our stories had one thing in common. We demonstrated measurable customer impact using a bunch of different measurements. And I have to say, it was so successful. First of all, it's the first time anybody has ever done that type of this science fair. So it was a risk, but it was so successful that we are actually shifting our product roadmap in 2019 as a result of this, and then a couple other kind of discussions that are happening across the company right now. So I think you're right. I think demonstrating that impact is really key. It can really get the attention of leaders.
We're getting really close to time, and there is one more question that I did want to ask. So I know this panel is such a wealth of knowledge, and we can go on and on talking about so many things, but I want this panel to be able to leave you with some advice. And so I'm gonna mix it up a little bit. I know imposter syndrome was talked about a little bit, and I'd love if you can share any advice that you either received or that you have for people who are interested in becoming leaders, who are leaders, but maybe feel imposter syndrome, and what would you tell them? And I'd love to hear from each of you, and then we'll break for lunch.
I'll start with my alternative bio. I had my first child at 19, married at 20, divorced at 36, engaged, getting married in 3 weeks at 41.
Woo!
Thank you. I had a loved one who was an alcoholic. I didn't get my college degree until last year. I'm running an 80-person agency. Like, what? I feel like an imposter every day of my life. I feel like an imposter right now. And it's this ridiculous thing, and it's not just a female disease, right? Guys have it too. But I think, the whole cheesy phrase, do something that scares you every day, and I use super cheesy things like this psychographic thing that's, if you smile, it's like, oh, this isn't terrifying. I love this. Like, I do that sort of corny stuff all the time. And you just like, oh, I'm going to pretend to be the type of person that can do this. And I've actually seen women who I'm like, oh my God, I want to be like her when I grow up. And I'm like, I'm going to pretend like I am right now and see how that works. And, sometimes it fits, sometimes it doesn't. But you find out what you're capable of by putting yourself out there and congratulate yourself. And for God's sake, that internal voice that says negative shit to you, punch it, kick its butt, be vigilant, kick her ass or his ass, whatever it is. Just wrangle that, because you should be your own best friend.
I love you so much. You are awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic. I lean into imposter syndrome for years. I ran away from it, pretended it didn't exist. It's real. I face it every single day. There's two things I think of when I wake up in the morning. The first is, I was just telling one of my team members this the other week. One is, what am I going to do today to make me better than I was yesterday? So that's the first thing I always think of. The second thing is, holy shit, how am I going to do that? I don't deserve to be here. And so I'm exhausted pretending like it's not a thing. And I guess for me, what's worked is just facing it, acknowledging it, and using that to just drive progress and improvement, self-improvement. So quite simple. Oh, and I also read a lot of Brene Brown. Anybody else do that? Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I think this is such a theme. I think imposter syndrome is real. We feel it. There's definitely a part of me that's like, just fake it till you make it. Just fake it till you make it. I'm wearing my red cowgirl boots today because when I put these on, I can do anything. Anything is possible. I can sit in front of a group of all of you and feel like I have my shit together, and it's okay for me to talk about being a leader. And sometimes it's a little thing like that. And I actually I had an interesting conversation with somebody the other day, and it was like, well, what are you doing to help empower other women? And it really got me thinking, and I realized one of the things I can do is I actually build up the other people I work with, and there's something that actually feels really good and makes me feel better about myself if I help the people around me be successful, because I think, you know what, I helped them, and that's something that I did, and that makes me feel good, and if I'm capable of helping them, I've got to be capable of something. There's something to that. So, I think it's everything from fake it till you make it, just do something silly like wear red boots, and just help the people around you and know that they feel it as much as you do. And so, it takes a village. We've all got to work together to support each other and to get through the tough days, and to just be like, oh my God, that thing, did that bomb? And, know that you can have those conversations with people, and it's okay. You don't have to be perfect, but you got to put yourself out there, because it's the only way you'll ever make it and be successful, is you just got to try stuff.
I would say one of the great things about being in UX is that we have such a clear vision of what we want to do at a very high level, which is make the customer's experience better, right? Make it as great as it can be. And so because that's always the kind of our main flag, in the sand, on the hill, wherever that thing is, because it's just so crystal clear, and granted, thousands of ways to get there, lots of challenges along the way, all those things, but we know that's what we're trying to get at, right? Because of that, I feel like, okay, then you know what? We can overcome anything along the way. And so, yeah, there's imposter syndrome, sure. Everyone, we all admit that's a thing. But then I'm like, you know what? If you're not a little nervous about it, if it's not kind of making you, not sure, but you know what? I'm going to do it anyways. It means you're not learning, right? Like, if you know everything, then you're not learning, and maybe you should be doing something else or pushing yourself somewhere. So, yeah, like, things come up. Just even, like, about a month ago, I've only been there 2 months, remember. A month ago, I was asked to kind of start sitting in and giving feedback on hardware design. I was like, sure, I could do that. I don't know anything about it. Yeah, of course I'm going to do that. Yeah. And started asking questions, right? Taking the same approach we do with design, thinking in general, design, just thinking about creative problem solving. So asking questions, trying to get understanding of what we're actually, of all the stakeholders, what they expect, what they're looking to get out of this new hardware initiative. And then next thing you know, 2 weeks later, guess what? You're overseeing hardware design going forward. I'm like, yeah. But then I'm like, yeah. You know what I mean? It's like 2 ways. It's like, holy shit, and yeah. And what do? I do the same thing I do everywhere else. I start doing my discovery process. I start calling up people, talking to them about hardware design. And we're going to get through it. It's going to be great. I'm going to fail. That's okay. Hopefully I fail, little fails, and then we do some really big wins. But I'm learning, I'm accomplishing something, I'm helping the business, and we're ultimately going to make the customer's experience better.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for our fantastic panel.